What happens when a life built entirely on routine is quietly tested by something unexpected, not dramatic, not reckless, just human? That question sits at the heart of this story, and it arrives almost unnoticed, the way most real turning points do. Owie is in her early 40s, and if you were to describe her life from the outside, you might call it stable, even admirable. She works at a restaurant where reliability matters more than recognition. She arrives early, leaves on time, and rarely brings her work home because, in many ways, her work already is her home. The rhythm of the kitchen, the predictable flow of each shift, the satisfaction of things being done properly, these are the anchors of her days. Outside of work, her life is modest and quiet. Simple meals, familiar streets, evenings that pass without much ceremony. It's not loneliness exactly, but it is solitude shaped by choice and habit. Owie doesn't see herself as someone waiting for change. She believes she has already made her choices, and she stands by them. In a world that often celebrates constant ambition or dramatic reinvention, she represents something else entirely. That sense of balance has gently interrupted the day. A young man named Kento walks into the restaurant asking for a job. Kento is clearly inexperienced. He's polite but uncertain, eager yet unsure of where to place his hands or how to read the room. The manager sees potential, but also risk, and instead of leaving Kento to learn through mistakes alone, makes a practical decision.
よし。はい、さあ入って。
はい。
ああ、座ってていいよ。葵さん、彼が今日からバイトで働いてもらう佐藤君、いろいろ教えてあげて。
はい、わかりました。
じゃあ、あとはよろしくお願いします。
はい。吉瀬葵です。よろしくね。
佐藤健人って言います。よろしくお願いします。
じゃあ健人くん、早速だけどいろいろ教えていくね。
よろしくお願いします。
Owie is asked to guide him through his first days, not as a supervisor with authority, but as a mentor with experience. Owie accepts without hesitation. To her, this isn't a personal favor or a special assignment. It's part of the job. She shows Kento how things work, explains procedures calmly, corrects him without embarrassment when he slips up. When he forgets an order or moves too slowly, she doesn't raise her voice. She waits, demonstrates, and lets him try again. It's a small thing, but in environments like this, patience can be rare. Kento notices. At first, their interaction is purely functional. Teacher and learner. Experienced hand and unsteady newcomer. But as the days pass, something subtle begins to form. Not a spark, not a dramatic shift, but familiarity. Kento starts to anticipate what Owie will say before she says it. Owie starts to notice how quickly he adjusts, how seriously he takes feedback. She sees effort where others might only see clumsiness. For Kento, Owie becomes more than someone showing him tasks. She becomes a reference point. The way she handles pressure without complaint. The way she treats everyone, customers, co-workers, even mistakes, with the same steady respect. He doesn't idolize her, but he respects her deeply, and that respect shapes how he approaches his own work. He becomes more careful, more attentive, more confident. Owie, on her part, begins to sense something she didn't expect. Not excitement, not romance, at least not yet, but recognition. In Kento's determination, she sees a reflection of values she's lived by for years, but rarely seen acknowledged. His sincerity reminds her that effort still matters, that learning is still honorable, that growth doesn't belong only to the young or the ambitious. Nothing inappropriate happens, nothing crosses a line, and that's important. Their connection, at this stage, is rooted entirely in shared purpose and mutual respect. Yet beneath the surface, something is quietly shifting. Owie becomes more aware of her own attentiveness. Kento becomes more thoughtful in her presence. Neither names it. Neither needs to. This is where the story asks its first gentle question, without judgment or urgency. Can meaningful change begin without disruption? Can something new enter a life not as a storm, but as a careful conversation between who we've been and who we might still become? For now, Owie continues her routines. Kento continues learning. The restaurant continues to open and close each day, as it always has. But the stillness Owie once mistook for completeness has begun to feel different, not threatened, not broken, just awake. As weeks pass, the rhythm between Owie and Kento settles into something steady and almost effortless. Not because the work becomes easier, but because they begin to understand how the other thinks. Owie no longer needs to repeat instructions. Kento no longer waits to be corrected. There's a quiet efficiency in the way they move around each other, an unspoken coordination that only develops when trust replaces uncertainty. What's interesting is that neither of them seems aware of when that trust fully formed. It didn't arrive with a single moment of praise or a dramatic success. It grew through repetition, through small corrections accepted without defensiveness, through long shifts handled without complaint, through mutual respect expressed in actions rather than words. Kento starts to stand out, not because he's exceptional, but because he's consistent. He shows up prepared. He asks questions that show he's thinking ahead. When mistakes happen, he owns them calmly and adjusts. Other co-workers notice the change, and some quietly attribute it to Owie's guidance. She doesn't deny it, but she doesn't take credit either. To her, mentorship isn't about shaping someone into your image. It's about helping them discover their own standards. Yet beneath this professionalism, a new layer of awareness begins to surface for Owie. She finds herself noticing details she once would have overlooked. The way Kento listens without interrupting. The care he takes when speaking to customers. The seriousness with which he treats responsibilities others dismiss as routine. These observations don't arrive with excitement, but with reflection. They don't disrupt her focus. They deepen it. For Kento, the shift is more emotional, though no less restrained. He begins to look forward to moments when Owie offers feedback, not because he needs approval, but because her perspective feels grounded and honest. In a world where encouragement is often loud or exaggerated, her quiet acknowledgement carries weight. It makes him feel seen, not praised. There are moments, brief and easily missed, when the atmosphere changes. A pause in conversation that lasts half a second longer than necessary. A shared look of understanding during a hectic rush. These moments are not romantic in nature, but they are intimate in the sense that they reflect mutual presence. Both are aware of them. Neither chooses to define them. This is where tension begins, not external, but internal. Owie starts asking herself questions she hasn't asked in years. Not about relationships, but about identity. When did she decide that her life would remain exactly as it is? Was that a choice she actively made, or one she simply never revisited? The stability she once valued now feels narrower, not confining, but incomplete in a way she can't fully explain. She doesn't blame Kento for these thoughts. In fact, she's careful not to place responsibility anywhere outside herself. That matters. The discomfort she feels isn't about someone else disrupting her life. It's about her realizing that growth doesn't always announce itself with urgency. Sometimes it arrives quietly, asking to be acknowledged rather than acted upon. Kento, meanwhile, becomes increasingly aware of the line that exists between them, not as a barrier, but as a boundary that deserves respect. He understands the difference in experience, in stage of life, in perspective. That awareness doesn't discourage him. It grounds him. It forces him to examine his feelings rather than rush toward them. He doesn't want admiration to become confusion or sincerity to turn into pressure. That restraint becomes part of the suspense of this story, not because something dangerous is approaching, but because both characters are choosing thoughtfulness over impulse. In a culture that often celebrates immediate action, their hesitation becomes meaningful. It signals maturity rather than fear. There is no confrontation, no dramatic exchange, no moment where everything is laid bare. Instead, there is silence, intentional, reflective silence. And within that silence, both Owie and Kento are doing something difficult and rare, listening to themselves. The question is no longer whether something is changing. It's whether they are ready to understand what that change requires of them, not emotionally, but ethically. Not in terms of desire, but in terms of responsibility. And that quiet, unresolved tension becomes the space where the story deepens, asking the viewer to consider something universal. When new feelings emerge, is the challenge to act on them or to understand them first? The shift, when it finally becomes undeniable, does not come from a mistake or an emotional outburst. It comes from clarity. And clarity, in stories like this, is often more unsettling than conflict. By now, Kento is no longer the new hire. He moves through the restaurant with confidence, takes initiative without overstepping, and earns trust on his own merit. Owie notices this with quiet pride, though she rarely expresses it directly. Watching someone grow under your guidance carries a particular weight. It invites reflection, not only on what you've given, but on what you may have set aside in the process. For Owie, that reflection grows deeper. She becomes more aware of the emotional discipline she has practiced for years. Not suppression, but management. She has learned how to place feelings in the background so responsibilities can remain front and center. It's a skill that has served her well. Yet now, she begins to wonder whether control and understanding are always the same thing. One day, after a long shift, there was a rare moment of quiet. Work was done. The pressure had dissipated. They happened to meet on their way home. The conversation, unhurried and natural, shifted to topics beyond schedule and procedure. Not personal confessions, just small observations about life, effort, and expectations. In that space, something changed, not between them, but within them. Kento chooses that moment to speak not impulsively and not emotionally. His words are careful, respectful, and measured. He acknowledges the boundary they share, the professionalism that defines their connection, and the gratitude he feels for her guidance. Only then does he express something more personal, not a demand, not a request, simply honesty offered without expectation. In that moment, Owie confronts something she has long postponed, her own emotional truth. Not about Kento specifically, but about her capacity for connection. Owie responds with the same care she has shown throughout the story. She acknowledges Kento's honesty and thanks him for his respect. As they return to their routines, something has undeniably changed. Not the nature of their work, not the professionalism they maintain, but the awareness they carry. Owie acknowledges the connection they've built and the care with which it has been treated. She makes it clear that whatever they choose must honor mutual respect, personal boundaries, and accountability, not just to each other, but to the environment they share. Kento agrees without hesitation. For him, the value has always been in the integrity of the choice, not the speed of the outcome. What follows is not a sudden transformation, but a thoughtful decision to move forward with intention. Their relationship, in whatever form it takes, is rooted in listening, patience, and shared responsibility. Owie's journey isn't about rediscovering youth or abandoning discipline. It's about acknowledging that emotional awareness and maturity are not opposites. They are partners. Kento's journey isn't about pursuit or validation. It's about learning that respect is the strongest foundation any connection can have. In the end, the story reminds us that genuine affection doesn't demand urgency. It doesn't erase boundaries or override judgment. Instead, it invites reflection, encourages communication, and rewards patience. And perhaps that is the most valuable takeaway of all, that no matter where we are in life, growth remains possible when we choose to listen to others and to ourselves with honesty and care. If this story made you think, share your perspective in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that explore human emotions with honesty, balance, and respect.